look, I just want to be very clear. Let me just say this. There is nothing in the Bible that commands people to be assholes and mean to and bigoted against
No. Anyone.
trans people and
Anyone.
not and non-binary people. And also, there is nothing that in the Constitution that protects your right to be an
That's
asshole
correct. Yeah.
to people and
For
then
religious
claim
reasons
that
or
and then
otherwise.
and then claim religious liberty. I mean, welcome to Seriously, the podcast that dives into the baffling,
We can't send them to a prison where there's animals, where there's livestock.
the ridiculous,
Like omelet's better than sex.
and downright unbelievable political climate in red states like Louisiana.
So we can't go there. There's no vegan jail.
Seriously. Seriously.
Welcome to Seriously. We're your hosts. I'm Michelle.
And I'm Ellie.
And today we're going to review a lot of what happened at the legislature in Louisiana this week. But before that, we're going to talk about our Seriously moments.
Yeah.
Ellie, do you want to start?
Sure. I guess this is not a seriously, but I'll just start by saying that folks can't totally tell, but I'll get up so they can. I'm wearing this dress that was my mom's in the 70s that I love. My brother and sister and I used a bunch of her clothes as dress-up clothes when we were little kids. And then I took all of them to college as my real clothes. And so I still wear this dress a lot, but it's going to come in really handy today because it's my nephew's birthday party and he's having a superhero birthday party. So it's like, I know what I have that's sort of a superhero outfit. And it feels relevant too, because yeah, that's how it feels in that fucking chaotic place that we call the legislature a lot of the time, where it's like trying to come in and be the superhero, like trying to fly in. And then, of course, like in the version, though, that would be like the parody version where it's like, wah, wah, and then like the superhero like flies into the wall or, something like that. But my seriously, so a couple things that I think are sort of under the general rubric of hubris. The stuff at the legislature, I think, is still in the general rubric of surreal. But in the rubric of hubris, then a couple things. Number one, Trump thinking that he can start a fight with the Pope and that maybe Trump will win that fight. That's been cute. I mean, there's been obviously a bunch of stuff with Trump being an insane person in terms of his religion iconography of late. But I'm willing to set that aside. I'm just really very amused that like he thinks that he can win a fight with the Pope and that JD Vance, the new Catholic, that this is part of his whole, mission and values, whatever, told the Pope to stay in his lane and really just talk about morality when the Pope is talking about war. So that's some real hubris.
Yeah, actually, my seriously was also JD Vance's warning to the Pope. So maybe we should play that before you go on.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Number one, when the Pope says that God is never on the side of those who wield the sword, there is more than a 1,000-year tradition of just war theory. Okay? Now, we can, of course, have disagreements about whether this or that conflict is just, but I think that it's important, in the same way that it's important for the Vice President of the United States to be careful when I talk about matters of public policy, I think it's very, very important for the Pope to be careful when he talks about matters of theology.
Like JD Vance's, I mean, there's so much. Every single thing that motherfucker says, it's like embedded with so much crap. Like JD Vance is not careful about what he says about anything, including this statement.
Right.
And like,
I wish that I had been in the room when his staff played that back for him. And we're like, sir, do you realize this is what you said?
Oh, you are assuming that happens. And I think that is not happening. And that is why these people persist in the hubris. Like, I mean, and, I'm not an expert on just war theory. I mean, the first thing that came to my mind was like, well, I mean, it certainly is true that both the Catholic Church and many other religions have launched religious wars over the years that like are not looked upon kindly by history.
Yeah, were the Crusades just?
Yes,
I don't think so.
But then I was listening to like some Catholic, like the Bulwark. There's some Catholics on there. They've been going nuts about this. About not surprisingly, just war theory has to do, of course, with that. Like you do everything else first
Mhm.
before, like all take all other possible off ramps before. So I mean, it's just absolutely ludicrous, like absolutely ludicrous. And JD Vance just thinks that he can just like bullshit and gaslight, just like gaslight everybody constantly. So good job, Trump and JD Vance with the war you've started with the Pope, and you're not going to win it. Number two in the category of hubris is Eric Swalwell thinking that maybe it was a good idea to run for governor when it turns out that like he should have known again the things he did that don't just amount to infidelity, but that like he's now credibly accused of crimes of actual sexual assault, and
Right.
it's being criminally investigated. So I mean, you should feel real lucky that you're like a sitting member of Congress. If that's and it was like the big revelation was in 2024. It's not like this is, I mean, even if it's ancient history, if it's very bad, that should probably be disqualifying. But this is not ancient history. This is like who you are. So
Yeah.
that's some real hubris. Again, it's like the same shit with Trump with like the Epstein files, where I'm like, okay, well, everyone else doesn't know what you did, but you know what you did. So,
Yeah.
like, why are you saying that all this shit should be released? And last thing, which does have a positive silver lining, is back to JD Vance and the Trump folks going to Hungary to stump for, literally to stump for Viktor Orban, like the biggest asshole, biggest corrupt
Mhm.
authoritarian in Europe, in the EU, who has been in power for many, many years and who is like bizarrely a darling of the right in the US, which has been extremely disturbing for a long time because he is a corrupt autocrat
Mhm.
who took over a democracy. Well, that democracy fought back and resoundingly defeated him in a really inspiring way. And despite JD Vance and his hubris going there to stump for Orban in a speech where he also, like, literally without any hint of irony or like knowledge of the hypocrisy, was complaining about how Ukraine has been supposedly engaged in election interference in that election. It's like, hmm, really? Okay. Well, so I mean, you as a sitting vice president, and he called Trump on his cell phone, like during his speech, but put Trump on his cell, like, let's call mom, let's call dad, I guess. It's like, I mean, that is not normal, like not normal
No.
at all. So, like, in addition to everything else, like, why would you even possibly be accusing another nation of trying to interfere in that election? So, a lot of hubris, but with the last one, it's just it's some hope both on that, like, democracy, maybe democracy doesn't actually die in darkness. Maybe it just like withers and waits, but it's ready to come back. And it's sort of related to our general, just what our general enemies are like. Then
Mhm.
with the Russians, then it also sort of made me think that they are very, very strategic, like very smart, very like long into the future thinking with the way that they play stuff. And they've been doing that, for example, with the show with Hungary all this time. Because I mean, people don't probably, everybody probably has heard, of course, that Orban was like, a Russian apologist and he was very close to the Kremlin. It's way more than that. I mean, they were feeding like sensitive information to
Mhm.
the Kremlin. They were blocking all sorts of EU actions that would have helped Ukraine and otherwise. But like the really insidious part is way deeper than that because like back in the day when there was the fall of communism and all of the Eastern European countries were emerging, then of course joining NATO was a huge threat to Russia. But really also them joining the EU was them becoming really a part of the West. And it was like, it was all going great. At the beginning, it's like any sort of fucking partnership or like, merger where it's like, it's all a party at the beginning. The Western Europeans were so happy to invite the Eastern Europeans in. It was going to be a consolidated Europe. It was going to help them out of their economic crisis and it was going to be great. It's been really hard. It was hard for, I mean, when I lived in Eastern Europe, it was like much more in that period where like the EU was kind of in a fight with like Poland all of the time because like they had very bad anti LGBTQ values still. Like there was still a lot of corruption in those countries. There was still a lot of conservative viewpoints that like the EU literally won't tolerate, that like you're not basically allowed to have to be an EU member. So like that has been okay over time, like on its own, right? It is all sort of worked out like it should have, becoming more progressive, becoming more democratic, becoming less corrupt. But what Russia knows is that when they sort of seed that though, like
Hmm.
making like Hungary like a guy, like a mole on the inside that makes the Western Europeans still be like, maybe these motherfuckers should not be at the table. Like
Yeah.
maybe the original sin was inviting these goddamn people to be a part of this coalition because they're kind of ruining it. So like that was, the Russians, they're very smart, they're very strategic, they're very long-term thinking. But again, with like a good moral of the story, when you're doing that in a way that like people don't like, that the general populace is against, it won't last forever.
Yeah.
Like that strategy works for a while, but it won't last forever. So I think, just in terms, it's not like there are particular lessons to be learned. There are particular
There
lessons to be
are.
learned for
Yeah.
our democracy, but I mean for our movement, then while it's not like a apples to oranges type of situation, I think there's inspiration, if not lessons to be learned in just thinking about that. The people who have influence and are in power and are being
Yeah.
very strategic by the way that they manipulate people and the way that they seed doubt and all of those things, what they're doing is not popular. It is not supported by majorities. And those kinds of efforts in societies where there's lots of media still or any media at all, then they don't work. I mean, in terms of media, Viktor Orban controlled the media there so much
Yeah.
that Magyar, the guy who won, he couldn't go on TV. He went door to door throughout the
Yeah.
country talking
That's
to people.
That's what I wanted to
So, yeah,
say is that I do think that, I mean, when thinking about some of the work that we're doing in
yeah,
terms of deep canvassing, this is
yeah.
why this work is so incredibly important because, I mean, in the United States, the media is also manipulated and that people are getting so much of their media from social media, which is
Right.
controlled by these algorithms and they get into these silos, right? And they're just being fed things that are reinforcing their already like misinformed ideas, right?
Or
And
they've
so,
just checked out. Like there's so many people I think
right,
at this point who like have just checked out. Like they're overwhelmed, they're sick of it. They're frankly trying to get by,
right,
So like
right.
we got to get, regardless of whether those people have checked out, like there's plenty of them that are interested in knowing what's going
Yeah.
on. They are interested in real facts.
But
Yeah.
I do think that more investment in that kind of, well, I guess what we used to call like retail politics, right? The door to
Mhm.
door, like actually having people show up in the communities in which they are running to be elected
Yeah.
and and investing in educating people about the issues that matter or finding out what issues matter and
Right.
then designing your campaign around policies that would address those issues, I think A is really important. And then
Yeah.
the other thing that's really interesting to me about or like in kind of inspiring hope core, I guess is what Aubrey called it, right?
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
About this was that Project 2025 was largely designed based on what Orban has
That's
done
right.
in
Yeah.
Hungary. It's put to paper the playbook, right, that Orban used to take over that country,
Yeah.
to threaten institutions,
Yes,
to
universities, the media, lawyers,
exactly
all of it. And the very disturbing thing early on was that the government, our government, was making progress on it at like an exponential rate
right,
compared to how it had gone in Hungary. Like the first 3 months, I mean, when we were all apoplectic with the Trump administration, the first 3 to 6 months, then I think like the reports from people who have been following both were like it took Viktor Orban about 5 years to get
right,
this far. So
yeah.
yeah, it started out
So
really scary.
so we can defeat this, and that yeah, that's hopeful. I like it.
Yeah, our systems are working. I mean, and we do have a longer democracy than Hungary, so our system should be stronger. But it is a good example that like those sort of relentless attacks, if they continue here, they will work at least in the
Yeah.
interim. They will. So
Yeah.
that's hard to stamp out. And hopefully then we're not going to this bullshit won't continue long enough that we get into such a situation that Project 2025 wants to take us to, and that the Hungarians have been dealing with, where like there is really no independent media, where they really have expelled basically like all intellectuals, or they've had to flee. And like, yeah, public universities, law firms, things like that are like just, useless or like parrot projects of the state.
Yeah.
So, yeah,
Well, I mean, we also have the added benefit of our leader being insane and picking a
yes,
fight with the Pope. So,
it's
which is
true.
alienating a lot of his base.
So true. I mean, it's like, yeah, all of that shit is like sort of in the short term, as I've said before on the podcast, it's concerning because I mean, we have an increasingly actual crazy person who's in charge. So that's just concerning.
And a crazy person who's number two,
Well, so
obviously.
that's the second part is that so crazy people right now is never a good thing. And then, just the need to nip this in the bud when we can so that
Mhm.
like whoever is elected next is not a continuation of this and frankly could be worse. Like honestly, in these movements they often become more extreme before the amelioration, before the pendulum goes back the other way. So like, let's hope that not too much crazy happens in the interim. And then at every chance that like Americans have, we need to be, putting in checks and balances, like, electing not crazy people, because the longer that this persists, the more damage that will be done.
So people need to vote.
Correct.
Okay. Well, we have a lot to cover, so
Yeah.
let's jump into our review
And
of what happened this week.
a lot of this I have not seen. I was certainly there for some things that were insane, but from what I know of this week, I mean, it was like just our legislature on display with like being crazy, like just doing things that are proposals that are nuts and just acting like assholes. I don't know. You,
Yeah.
you tell me what what your general framing of this past week.
So we're going to start with House Bill 611, which, just to remind people, is the bill that would have required pregnancy centers to be licensed by the Louisiana Department of Health. So, as we mentioned last week, part of that bill was heard last week, but it wasn't fully heard. So it came back again this week. And the hearing did not go well. I'll just be very frank about that. I think that you were extremely well prepared. And then it also benefited us that Dr. Collada, who heads the Louisiana State Board of Medical Examiners, which is
Yes.
the board that oversees and regulates the practice of medicine in the
Yes.
state.
Yes. He is the executive director of the government agency that regulates doctors and the practice of medicine. So, meaning also who is responsible for understanding what the unauthorized practice of medicine is. Yes.
That's correct. So he was there and he also came to the table to explain a lot of things to
Mhm.
these committee members. But nevertheless, the Louisiana Right to Life had better prepared, I think, a lot of their friends, their sycophants on the committee, including Michael Eccles, who I think does something in healthcare. I'm not exactly sure what.
I think he's a nurse. He is a piece of work. He is running for Congress. And he's always an asshole, to be clear. But he also, I think, is very motivated this session to like be on the record with certain things that he thinks will help him.
Yeah. 100%.
At the last hearing, too, then he was not there. Eccles was not there. Cruz was there, who's also like, the resident asshole in chief on health and welfare. But like he
Mhm.
didn't have his backup. He didn't have his buddy with Rep Eccles. And like the two of them on that committee, they love this kind of shit. They sit right next to each other. And they're like the asshole peanut gallery. Like it's like the
Yeah.
Muppets, like the grumpy old men in the Muppets, but they're not grumpy old men. They're like like
They're like
arrogant
young,
assholes.
yeah, young Nazis. That's what they
Yeah,
are.
that's
Yeah.
right. Yes, they're like the dudes in high school that you never ever would have gone out with, but who like thought they were like really hot shit.
Rep Eccles is still a question. Thank you. These are all just for the author. I don't need anybody else. I need the author here.
Thank you.
All right.
Here.
Would you consider this bill successful if these types of nonprofits shut down?
That's not the intention.
Okay. So is this about protecting the public or controlling these types of organizations?
It is literally about protecting moms and babies.
Okay. If the state can do this to one category of nonprofit, what stops it from doing to others?
Well, are you talking about butterfly museums or something else? I'm serious.
These types of nonprofits that are offering these types of screenings or services.
Well, I think anybody who's offering medical advice should have a medical supervisor. So if there's another group out there offering medical advice and they're doing it in some context without a medical supervisor, I don't like that.
Like Rep Eccles, like in his like just typical assholeness, like is like this question is just for the bill author because like like Rep Freeman had both a lawyer, me at the table, and an expert on medicine and the practice of medicine. But he wanted to just like be a dick, of course, to her. And like, I mean, just the whole thing is so absurd. I mean, like, is this about shutting? What's the difference between this and what are you going to do to other nonprofits? Well, if other nonprofits are practicing medicine, then that's a problem. But like, no one has pointed out any other organizations that are practicing medicine
Yeah.
without doing so with an actual doctor providing supervision as required by the Board of Medicine. The whole thing was like the peanut gallery went in like big and early, and then they tried to go down a bunch of other rabbit holes of like, what if you go to get like eyeglasses like at the mall? Are they practicing medicine? And Dr. Carlotta's like, I mean, it depends on exactly what's happening in terms of if they're rendering a diagnosis as opposed to just, like fitting you for glasses. But all the scenarios that they came up with that like, oh, there's going to be all this creeping regulation is just bullshit. Like, it's just 100% bullshit. Those are not circumstances where like there's no doctor involved, but yet also the information being provided is absolutely medical advice. And Dr. Collada was super clear that these services, they are rendering diagnoses and medical advice. And also the right to life was super clear that they are providing healthcare services. So like,
Yeah.
that's just those facts were established.
I think that it seems very clear to me that the opposition's strategy here was to admit that they were practicing, that they were providing healthcare services, that there was medicine being practiced at these centers, that wasn't the primary goal of these centers, and then was okay that medicine was being practiced there because they had medical directors, and that this was, burdensome and like over-regulation. And I think that the other thing that they had really thought about was this whole argument about, well, can't people just practice medicine?
Yeah.
Like, can't people just provide healthcare services without having to have all this onerous regulation?
Well, that was where like I was already like, this is going off the rails. And I mean like from the committee, not from like anything else
Yeah.
going on. That like there's an obvious slippery slope argument here that they were trying to make, that the Right to Life is trying to make, and that they were getting these folks tuned up on. And that's like a standard legal argument that we make in all kinds of different contexts, because like it's just one of the basic things you learn in law school, and there's a logic to it. Like once you do this, where does it end? It's a slippery slope.
That's right.
So, that was sort of the basis of where this was supposed to be going. But then like they were just really, including honestly, the chairman of the committee, who I think is smart and I think is, in general, good on policy, and who is a nurse, with just a bunch of talk about like, yeah, I mean, kind of like really what's the harm? Maybe like people are kind of technically practicing medicine, but like, whatever, who cares? That was very weird and not just shocking, but a little bit disturbing.
It also seemed to me a little bit that Chairman Miller was also himself like a little bit confused about like why people are going there to get ultrasounds. So, and that was purposefully designed. So this was something that Cruz, Representative
Yeah.
Cruz also questioned Amy about, was like, why do you think people go to these pregnancy centers to get ultrasounds?
Questions from Representative Cruz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. When someone goes to a pregnancy center, what do you think the purpose of the ultrasound is?
Well, you and I spoke about this when we were eating
All right,
breakfast.
what is the
purpose
client
is
going
to
there
show
for?
them the baby and have them be excited
The
to see
baby,
the
right?
Exactly.
So not to provide medical advice, to show them the baby, right?
And I'm not opposed to them showing them the baby. There may be something on that ultrasound that I couldn't read.
Maybe. And by having an opportunity to go in freely and to get an ultrasound, maybe someone will say, hey, I don't know what this is. Maybe you should go see a doctor in a clinic where you can get an ultrasound read by someone.
Well, if
Because
there
the
was a
purpose of
sign,
this one is not to do that. The purpose of this is show life in the womb.
and I understand that, Representative Cruz. And so what I would ask is that there would be a sign available to that person to they know that's the purpose and it's not a medical clinic.
Well, let's get back on some other things that were brought up about the practice of medicine. I went to Walmart the other day and got a pair of readers. Should I have had a doctor do that instead? I mean, where does reason begin? And then where do the regulations need to begin? You've got to agree there's some point in between there where you can do things yourself or other people can do them without
totally
a medical
agree.
degree.
I've bought readers at Walmart myself, but that is not anybody practicing medicine on me. That's me going, oh, I can't read this, so I'm going to go try on some glasses at the
Practicing
drugstore.
medicine
There's no eye
if I
exam.
suggested them for you?
I mean, if you and I were having a personal conversation about our eyesight declining as we age, you might say, hey, I bought this kind, try that brand, but that's not you practicing medicine. I mean, that's not you diagnosing me.
I say your vision's bad. You need to do something about it.
But you're not. I'm not coming to you as a medical professional. So that's a totally different conversation.
Disagree with what you think these pregnancy centers are trying to do. They're trying to save lives. They're trying to help mothers. They are not trying to diagnose things. They are not trying to take care of things. All 12 of the pregnancy centers that participate in PBCI have a medical director.
Is that in the report?
No, that's an independent confirmation I got.
Well, this is what they have on their websites. that what they're doing with ultrasounds. Like they're
That's right.
absolutely the services that they claim to be providing and which they are providing are diagnostic. This is not just like to give people a picture to put on their refrigerator. They're telling you that they will be able to, and they will, they will inform you of how far along you are, whether the pregnancy is viable, whether it's an intrauterine pregnancy. Like they're absolutely telling you that what the information that they will provide is what you would get out of like a real prenatal appointment with an OBGYN. The Right to Life plus the Asshole Peanut Gallery did a very good job of like obfuscating the issues.
How Cruz characterizes the purpose of people going to these pregnancy centers directly contradicts what both Erica Enzina
That's right.
and Dorothy Wallace said at the hearing the previous week. They don't have their story straight.
Yeah, they
here.
don't. And I think it contradicts what Angie said in this hearing. Yeah. I'm sure that what happened with, over the week, there was a lot of frantic calling from Ben Clapper to folks on the committee and a lot of just, like throwing shit out, like who's going to latch onto this? What can we possibly say? It was just like a lot of obfuscation, like from are they doing medical services or is this just like a picture taking exercise to on the other end, oh my God, like it sounds like they're doing such an amazing job. They all have medical directors, all of the centers, and for sure all of the centers in the PBCI and the program that gets all the main funding from the state, that they all have medical directors. There's no evidence of that other than them just saying it. Like literally just like one person, one lawyer, Angie, at the table being like, on behalf of all of them, I'm saying that they all have medical directors. So I don't know if that's true. Nobody knows if that's true. Like literally the only evidence of it is that statement. There's no public or other evidence of that. This is again where like these people on our legislators are just like, they just will latch on to anything that the right to life says and be
Well,
like, okay,
allow,
all right,
yeah,
all right, done.
allow them
Okay.
to justify voting with the right to life.
Because not only is there no evidence that that is true, but even if it were true, it doesn't answer the question. Having a medical director does not answer the question about whether the services you're providing are properly supervised by a physician. Medical directors are people who, set policies and procedures, visit every once in a while. And granted, some of them in general, I mean, with medical directors, can be very involved. Some of them in other settings are employed at that place. That's definitely not true here. Your practicing medicine has been established, and you have some doctor somewhere that has a loose affiliation and a title, affiliated with your clinic. Okay.
That's right.
So then beyond that, what is that person doing? And how is that person supervising people and or themselves doing or with another licensed physician doing the parts of these services that must be done by a doctor, including interpreting this ultrasound? So that got glossed over because even though it's like the heart of the issue, it got glossed over for a bunch of reasons. It was just like one of those hearings where just the frustration, like my level of brain wanting to explode, where it's like, what we're talking about something that has kind of nothing to do with anything. And in a different context, you guys, the Health and Welfare Committee, I'm fairly confident would be able to understand that. It's only when it's, the right to life that somehow just all bets are off the table. And that committee starts saying that is it really that big of a deal? People are practicing medicine without a license. And as long as you can name a doctor or claim there is one who's involved, isn't that good enough? When else would that
What are
be
you talking
true?
about? Yeah. So Representative Mandy Landry, who's on the committee, did ask Angie Thomas from NIFLA about the guidance that NIFLA had issued and some training that NIFLA had done vis-a-vis ultrasounds.
Mhm.
And they're really concerned about their sort of legal liability in this area. And so Mandy asked Angie Thomas about that. And that was where Angie really kind of goes into a lot of detail about we have never denied that we are practicing medicine.
National Institute of Family and Life Advocates advise members to proceed with caution when giving an ultrasound to a woman they suspect may have an ectopic pregnancy, calling the condition the greatest medical and legal risk for clinics. So given that the national organization is very concerned about this, does that not change your opinion in the sense of we need to make sure that this is done in a very disciplined environment so that the national organization doesn't have to face the greatest medical and legal risk that they refer to? What should we be doing to meet their standard?
No, my opinion wouldn't change because we've always said that ultrasound is the practice of medicine, and that anybody who's in medicine, especially obstetrics, knows that an ectopic pregnancy is the most dangerous thing. So that's why you should be excited about these pregnancy centers providing free ultrasounds to women who otherwise wouldn't get it. Do you know that pregnancy centers in Louisiana provided over 5,000 ultrasounds to women last year that otherwise wouldn't have gotten it? And if there is any indication of an ectopic pregnancy or a miscarriage, they are given ectopic and miscarriage precautions and are sent to the ER or the urgent care. The ultrasounds that pregnancy centers are providing are looking for three things. They are, first of all, they're called a limited obstetric ultrasound, and they're looking for gestational age, cardiac activity, and an intrauterine pregnancy. So while you can't completely rule out an ectopic pregnancy, if you do not see a pregnancy in the uterus, then that would give the medical professional, the doctor interpreting the scan, pause, and they would say, we need to get her to the ER. So
that point in terms of what the what the advice that NIFLA is giving to clinics, which, I mean, on its face seems like good advice, which is that, if someone presents themselves at an unlicensed pregnancy center and you suspect that they might have an ectopic pregnancy, then you should not do an ultrasound. You should not treat them. You should tell them that they need to go with expedition to a real medical provider. So that's good advice. The problem with that, and I did say this in my testimonies before Angie's testimony, is that, that because the whole theory here about why everything's fine, why the kids are all right, is that we got a medical director and we got standing orders. But like, a standing order has nothing to do, and Dr. Collada corroborated this, with like any particular patient or anything that involves like independent medical judgment. So like, you can't, like, how are these people on the ground supposed to operationalize that advice from NIFLA? They don't fucking know, or they're not qualified to know if someone is suspected of having an ectopic pregnancy. There's no way for that legal and medical advice that NIFLA is giving to be operationalized in a way that is safe or appropriate if the people on the ground are not licensed and are not trained and are not overseen by an actual physician. So like, again, just a total disconnect between what is happening.
Well, I mean, their claim, again, is that they all have medical providers. And there was testimony from one of the people that, administers, like oversees one of the pregnancy centers. And she was like, don't worry, we have a medical provider, but requiring us to be licensed would just be such a burden. I mean, we're just trying, again, we're just trying to save babies.
That's right.
Just trust us. Like we have somebody looking at the ultrasounds.
Yeah, but nobody really said that. That's the thing, though. They basically only said that they've got a medical director, and so don't worry. Dorothy Wallace did, in contrast to what she'd already testified to, did, I think, lie in her testimony the week before when Mandy asked her, or Landry asked her, is the doctor interpreting every ultrasound? And she was like, yes. And I mean, that was in contrast to what she had already said. And again, I'd like, maybe we should tell Rep. Landry this, for at times in these hearings, maybe somebody needs to remind these folks that they are under oath.
They're under oath.
When you sign that card, you are under oath.
Yes.
No one was ever saying that these doctors are actually involved in the care at all. They were just like, we have a medical director. We have a medical director and we have standing orders. So again, where you're just talking around it, but in that way where you're trying not to perjure yourself, nobody was talking about that this doctor is actually involved or is actually interpreting anything. Yeah.
Well, and I think one of the things that was clear, so two people that actually worked on the audit report that included the recommendation that these centers be licensed because of the services that they're providing came to both hearings last week and the week before. Last week, they talked about how they did their audit and what they found and why they made that recommendation.
Hi, my name is Emily Braun. I was the auditor in charge on the Pregnancy and Baby Care Initiative report that you're referencing, Representative Landry. And this is Gina Brown, the audit manager on the report. To address Angie Thomas's question specifically, pregnancy centers are not required to comply with staff licensing requirements because they're not a licensed healthcare facility. They're also not required to adhere to HIPAA data confidentiality requirements, and clients don't have a formal avenue to file a complaint if an adverse event takes place at a pregnancy center. We sent out a survey to all 12 of the pregnancy centers that were participating with the PBCI initiative, and the responses that we received regarding staff licensing requirements, we found that 9 out of the 12 stated they had an active license. Some of those pregnancy centers participating in the PBCI initiative did not have a physician with an active license on staff. because they're not required to comply with staff licensing requirements.
Did the audit report mention at all around how many entities might be labeling themselves as pregnancy centers?
At the time the report was released, there were 38 pregnancy centers across the state, and none held licenses through LDH. And we found through our work that several of these centers were offering healthcare services without the regulatory authority of LDH.
So we found that none of the pregnancy centers were licensed healthcare providers, nor were they required to disclose that they were not licensed healthcare providers. So 9 of the 12 pregnancy centers reported that they had a physician with an active license on staff, but they weren't necessarily required to have an active a physician with an active license on staff. Yeah.
They weren't required because there's not a regulation over them.
Yeah.
So that kind of preempted our 2 matters for legislative consideration in this report. The first being that if you're not going to be regulated, if you're not going to have a license, disclose that. So the women that go there know that going in. And the second was to consider mandating that they are licensed if they're providing healthcare services.
Is medical director here like a defined term? Like medical director means X?
I don't know.
Or you just say, I have a medical director.
Right. I don't
You're
know
not
if
sure.
it's defined in state law.
That report and that testimony is really very devastating for like not only how the centers are operating, but how the state is administering the program, like just in general. The Right to Life and the folks on the committee basically just took like a Trumpy approach to the whole thing, which is attack the auditors, like just go after them for, like the report being biased and beyond its scope. This is the Legislative Auditor's Office. This is a part of our government. It is a nonpartisan and a part of our actual government, that is tasked with looking into, in general, how state funds are being spent, what they're being spent on, and the outcomes. This is not a political body, like at all. They're not coming at this from like any perspective other than we audit what's going on with state funding. And when we started auditing this, we were like, what the fuck is going on here?
So Representative Cruz had some questions for the auditors. So he called them to the table and just right off the bat, he was just like, didn't you exceed your authority by even asking them about the services that they were providing? I mean, or why were you looking at all 38 of the pregnancy centers when only 12 of them are receiving state funding? I mean, just completely grilled them.
Their testimony had already been devastating on day one. And so, of course, like the Right to Life was like worried that, it was done, like that the legislative auditors weren't going to come back to the table. So they needed Cruz to get them to come back up with his like amazing talking points.
It didn't matter though. They were extremely well prepared.
Of course.
And
again, these are people who this is their work. This is what they do on behalf of the government. So
That's right. Anyway, the outcome is this, knowing that this committee did not have an appetite for requiring licensing of the pregnancy centers. So Rep. Freeman had come prepared with an amendment to not require licensing, but require that they be public about and post a disclosure and let people know that we're going there to receive services, that they were not licensed under the Louisiana Department of Health. And even with that amendment, the committee rejected this.
Yeah. Because again, there's nothing to see here, Michelle. It is unbelievable. And again, this just falls into the category of like, when are people in our legislature going to wake up to the fact that like, these are real issues that affect real people that people care about. And there's no reason why, just like anybody else in the state who is providing healthcare services to folks, that we don't make sure that what they're providing is quality from licensed people. And particularly now in Louisiana, we don't have a lot of pregnancy resources that are available to people. Like, not only is there not a lot of government money being spent on that, there's literally not a lot of places for women to go. So many of the parishes in Louisiana are maternity care deserts. I mean, there's just endless research that shows that, both from, external nonprofits and the government itself. So like the organizations that are well situated to be providing this care, and in fact in many instances are providing this care, we should try to make sure that that care is high quality.
Yeah,
That should be a no-brainer. But
it should be. Quite frankly, I think that we made a legitimate argument that that should be the case. But the problem is they are going to do whatever the hell the Louisiana Right to Life tells them to do. They're going to find any reason to justify that vote. And, I mean, they're perfectly happy to just like take it on faith that because these are like Christian pregnancy centers that just want to save babies, that we should just trust that they're doing everything on the up and up. And it's
I
completely
know. Yeah. I mean,
fucked up.
it is fucked up. It's the same with a lot of stuff with the abortion bans where you're like, I hope nothing really bad happens, man. I mean, like part of what we were talking about was evidence from other states about, again, undiagnosed ectopic pregnancies where, people could have died. Women are going to these centers. They think that they're getting a real ultrasound. They're not. They're getting an ultrasound interpreted by a person who's not qualified to do so. And so there's the potential for things to be missed that have a wide range of effects, both for maternal and fetal health and development, but also that can be life threatening. So, you just hope that like that's not how we need to learn these lessons, is because of, really devastating results to actual people. Yeah.
Indeed. I think that we should just let people know that House Bill 897, which was the
Yes.
bill by Representative Mandy Landry that would require that these pregnancy centers actually have some privacy protocols in place to keep sensitive personal health information that people are providing to them when they go there as clients, to keep that information private. And that bill came up after the licensing bill. And luckily, there was a little bit more appetite for
It's
patient
most
privacy.
most basic thing. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So that bill actually made it out of the committee. So it
Yep.
will be heard probably on the House floor next week. So we'll have a link in the show notes of how people can send an email to House members and let them know that they support that. Okay. I have two bills that I want us to talk about that we have. One of them we talked about a couple weeks ago. One of them I don't think we've talked about at all. So we'll start with that one. And this is House Bill 1137. It was introduced very late, actually after the session had already started, and it is by Chairwoman Cruz. So this is Representative Cruz, and this bill is about legitimizing workplace discrimination against trans people. I mean, there's just no other way to describe it. So what the bill does is that it allows for, and I think encourages actually, intentional misgendering and dead naming of people in workplaces. It allows for and encourages creating a hostile work environment.
I've heard a little bit from you and other folks about this bill, but it's saying what if one does that?
I'll tell you what.
Okay, yeah, go ahead. Tell me what does the
So
bill do?
it says employers cannot have a policy requiring employees to use pronouns that don't match someone's biological sex or to use someone's preferred name. So they can't have a policy that says, hey, if you work here,
This
and
is
you
our
have
policy.
yeah, this is our policy. If you have a colleague that you're working with that would prefer you use this name or prefer you use these pronouns, you have to do that. This bill says no, employers can't do that.
Does this apply to private employers as well as public employers?
Yes, it does.
Interesting. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. It also says that a worker, an employee, cannot be fired, demoted, disciplined, or otherwise penalized for refusing to use their colleagues' preferred name or pronouns. So you could just completely ignore the wishes of your colleagues, call them by whatever pronouns or name that you think they should be called by, and you could not be fired from that.
Well, not just that. I mean, yeah, so I'm glad you're explaining the bill because like it is even more unworkable than I had than I had thought. I mean,
Right.
talk about government overreach, first of all. Like you're telling private employers that like they can't have a policy that says this. I mean, like, like which in some places is already protected under the law. And,
Mhm.
Even in other places would just be considered like, whatever, respectful speech, in this work environment, we're allowed to control to some extent how our employees interact with each other. Number
Yeah.
two, the like not firing people thing. I mean, this is not like they're not talking about people, the potential firees being in any sort of protected class. And in wrongful termination and employment discrimination cases, it's always very muddy, like why something was done, right? Like you say you were fired because of X, they say you were fired because of Y. That's just like always the case. So like, you're going to say if you're the asshole, I mean, in this situation where you're the employee that, oh yeah, I refuse to, call so-and-so by the pronouns that they said that they wanted to be, called. And that's why they fired me. And your employer is going to be like, we fired you because you're a huge asshole that made like life impossible around here. And also you were stealing from the company, like, I
Right.
mean, it's just all so dumb and like just counter to the law.
Well, I have an okay stop for you. You have about 5 minutes of Cruz introducing this on the floor and getting questions from his colleague. You can tell me to stop whenever you feel like you just can't take anymore and need to jump in.
In plain terms, this bill ensures that no Louisiana worker can lose their job or face punishment for using pronouns that correspond to a person's biological sex rather than a self-identified gender. It's not about hatred or exclusion. It's about safeguarding constitutional rights, biological reality, and workplace fairness against ideological overreach.
So I'll just do an okay step right now. Is that there's no evidence that is happening. I mean, I've never heard of a scenario where people are being fired for that reason, let alone would this be, like we need to make sure that in the rare scenario that it is happening, that, the employer can't do it.
Okay. Well, he claims that there was a person
One
who was
person.
removed
Okay.
from a school board for this reason, but that's not employment, but whatever. Okay.
Requiring employees to use preferred pronouns on pain of termination forces them to endorse a contested worldview that biological sex is fluid and subjective.
Who is doing that on pain of termination? Like, again, this is just a made up world. I've never heard of a scenario where employers have policies that are like, and these are our gender policies, pronoun policies, and if you don't follow it, you're going to get fired. Number two, there's all sorts of other scenarios that he is like fully in favor of, that employers are allowed to implement ideological things like not having healthcare plans that allow for abortion care, like, things like that. So this is just, in this one context, then, yeah, it's totally like out of line for employers to be allowed to have any policies.
I also just would like to point out for our listeners that Chairwoman Cruz is the chairwoman of the House Labor Committee, which has for several years been presented with ENDA, which is the Employment Non-Discrimination Act that Representative Boyd has been bringing for the last couple of years, that would prevent employment discrimination against people based on their sexual orientation and gender identity. He has repeatedly opposed that and refused to let that bill out of his committee, or her committee.
That's probably what gave him the idea on this.
I mean, and then she's claiming that, this is 100% absolutely necessary.
Right, because of the law that we've never passed. Protecting people is not like, if ENDA had been passed, is not the same as then people who want to violate that protection are themselves being discriminated. So, but here, those protections don't exist anyway, right?
No, she thinks that there's that this is a widespread problem.
Yeah.
It's creating all kinds of litigation when when she has literally blocked any law that would be the basis of any litigation. So no fucking litigation is happening.
But people have causes of action for wrongful termination for a whole
Sure.
variety of reasons. But, it sounds like that nobody has pointed to, let alone a widespread problem, but it sounds like kind of any problem with people being fired on that basis.
Okay, let's keep going.
That is exactly the kind of the government-compelled ideological conformity the U.S. Supreme Court has repeatedly struck down.
First of all, that's not true. That U.S. Supreme Court in Bostock, which Gorsuch wrote, actually extended Title VII protections to the LGBTQ community. It was several years ago. It was a big decision, and even the conservatives signed on to that. So I don't know what he's talking about. He doesn't know what he's talking about. So,
Disagreement over pronouns is a matter of conscience and science, not a firing offense. The bill also upholds biological truth and scientific integrity. Human sex is binary, determined at conception by chromosomes, XX or XY, and they're immutable. This is not opinion. Gender ideology, by contrast, demands that feelings override facts. Allowing employers to punish employees for acknowledging biological sex turns workplaces into indoctrination centers rather than places of honest collaboration. Finally, this bill protects religious liberty. Many people hold sincere religious beliefs rooted in scripture and tradition that sex is God-given and binary. Forcing them to use pronouns that contradict those beliefs places an unconstitutional burden on their faith.
I like it that Cruz, repeatedly at the legislature, plays both a lawyer and a doctor, of which he is neither.
Neither.
Again, he's just that asshole from high school who wasn't very smart and was kind of good looking, but really just an asshole. And now he's a pilot. If he wanted to talk about some stuff that's happening with aviation, I would at least respect that he, has some expertise in that. He knows nothing about the law. He knows nothing about medicine, but yet, he's declaring all the things that are established in the law, established in medicine, and none of it is true. None of it.
Well, the lawyers, the Americans Defending Freedom bullshit lawyers, probably emailed him this, whatever pages he's reading off of.
That's right. That's right.
Okay.
They'll take the talking points at face value. They don't need to confirm it. They don't need to do anything, and they will just deliver them on point and on brand.
That's right. Okay, let's keep going.
Finally, this bill promotes workplace harmony and fairness. It tells every worker, whether in an office, factory, hospital, or classroom, that they will not be punished for refusing to participate in someone else's delusion.
Someone else's delusion?
Exactly. That sounds like it's really promoting workplace harmony.
To participate in someone else's delusion.
Yeah. Right. I mean, even the talking points, of course, that have been prepared for him, cannot help themselves to be so offensive.
House Bill 1137 doesn't target any group. It protects all employees from viewpoint discrimination.
Louisiana is an at-will employment state. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And so as an employer, I have the right to fire or to terminate the employment of any one of my employees as long as it's not based on race, gender, or race, sex, national origin, color, creed. Is that correct?
And that's how this buttresses that. Basically, the employer cannot compel you to do things against your rights.
What is he talking about?
I don't know.
Okay. All right. So let's listen to Representative Terry Landry ask him some pointed questions.
Does your bill address a repeated offender, a person who repeatedly just calls the person in opposition to the pronouns that they wish to be called? She, and I kept referring to you as a he, and you've asked me several times to stop, and I continue. You're saying there's nothing that can happen to me for continuously calling you in obligation to your biological sex, correct?
In opposition to your biological sex. Me being a man, if I say, call me a girl, call me a girl, call me a girl, and you won't, no.
There's nothing that can happen to me.
Not what this bill covers.
So what happens if, as an employer, I feel as though that type of interaction is causing a hostile work environment?
Then you can't fire me.
But doesn't that set a conflict with the federal regulations of a hostile work environment?
No, not at all. Because my right to speak or not to speak is still protected by the Constitution.
If I'm an employer and I feel like this back and forth between two of my employees over pronouns is causing a disruption to production and is causing a hostile work environment, which then opens the employer up to a lawsuit of a hostile work environment, how are those things not conflicting?
I'm sorry. He has been convinced that the Constitution protects without any limitation his right to speak or not to speak. And so
Of course he thinks that, because this is what like the right says. Rev Landry is exactly right. And not just that, but like one of the classic and really the main one embedded in our law about hostile work environments is sexual harassment.
Yeah.
And with this, obviously that is what this it's gender based what we're talking about. So like 100% then this could fall into activities that would constitute or that rise to a level of a hostile work environment. And yeah, your First Amendment rights don't protect you then.
what Cruz believes the Constitution protects,
The right to be an asshole. The right to be an asshole.
the Constitution protects your right to be a complete asshole at work. So
Yeah.
I could go to
Right.
work at a place where there was somebody that was like continuously calling me like a fucking dirty Jew.
That's right. I don't know what the difference would be if you tried to pass a law that said nobody can no employer can fire you, take adverse action, discriminate against you because of your deeply held beliefs and First Amendment right to say racist things at work. The other sort of employment law stuff is about they can't hire or fire you based on racial discrimination. But are we now going to say that they also can't fire other employees who are like actively saying racist things at work and creating a hostile work environment? I mean, that would be that would not be good for work environments. That would not be good. I mean, like, it's just all crazy. I mean, and again, we're like, who is this happening to?
I think we need to take it from the other viewpoint. The person that causing the hostile work environment is the one that's compelling someone or trying to compel them to use a gender, sex, pronoun, whatever, against their wishes. That's the one causing a hostile work environment, not the one that refuses to do so.
What the absolute fuck?
I mean, that's sort of predictable. He's like, that's a hostile work environment for that person who is just dying to be a bigot at every turn, which also is not at all what the definition of a hostile work environment is under the law. So, there's that. But like an employer constraining you or anyone at work constraining you from doing everything that you would possibly want to do or say is not a hostile work environment. An environment where like there is pervasive sexual harassment and discrimination, that's a hostile work environment. And that's what he's trying to sanction. Oh, I mean, it's so fun. I mean, it's only funny because it's just so off the reservation. I mean, it's obviously not so off the reservation this bill passed, but just like the way that these people think about the world, right? Like, it just, to me, it's like, they don't think about the world.
The people that are
It's
creating
not
the
a
hostile work
community
environment
project.
are trans people who are just trying to like go to work and do their job and like have their, have some like tiny modicum of respect from their colleagues.
Or any employer, any employer
Yeah.
that's trying to enable folks to do that. Like and even if that employer doesn't really this is true for most employers, let's be honest. They don't really give a shit about what the conflict is about. They just want there to not be conflict. So they're like, Just everybody stop doing
Be
things
nice
that
to
like
each other.
you don't
Just
need to
be a
be
good
doing. Like just like
also
treat people around here with dignity and respect. Whether you disagree with it on the basis of race, on the basis of gender identity, on the basis of whatever, don't bring that shit to our office or our factory or whatever it is, right? Like it's just they always want to turn everything on its head where of course like the real victims here are, these conservative people who are somewhere out in the world, wanting to fly their asshole flag and they feel that they've been put down in that process. It's like America's like individualism to its absolute worst degree, where
Yep.
it's like the individualism of the asshole person who is absolutely working against everybody else. Like the community project here of like we all need to work together, we all need to live together. It's just it's
Okay.
it's not only infuriating, it's just like it turns everything on its head about like how society and workplaces are supposed to function.
Also, it's not very Christian. Just saying.
For sure.
Reb Wilder for a question.
What this bill is attempting to do, again, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe it's attempting to protect. So in my case, I've raised my 3 children to believe that the Bible is the ultimate truth, and it's clearly defined in Genesis. So those are religious beliefs. So when my children go to work somewhere as children or as adults, this is protecting them. If you were their boss and telling them they now have to do something which they religiously disagree with, this bill is simply prohibiting the authority at the job from forcing them to compromise their religious beliefs on this particular issue, correct?
That's correct.
Wait, I'm sorry.
I
His
know.
children go to work
Well,
somewhere
because
as
he's what
children?
do you know that? Because he like a last session or the one before is like the architect of trying to get rid of all the child labor laws in our state.
Oh, really?
Yes, Wilder, literally, he is. Yeah, he's trying to get rid of the child labor laws.
I have not read all of the Bible, and I'm honestly sure that neither has Rep Wilder.
Yeah.
But I do not think that the Bible requires you. I don't think there's anything in the Bible that requires you to be a fucking asshole
Exactly. I mean, the whole
to
again,
trans or non-binary
or
people.
to anyone. I mean, again, like the argument has both a slippery slope that like it could encompass basically anything, any view, any statements that someone claims is religiously based. So there's that. And then also like you can hold those beliefs. Rep Wilder's kids can be like whatever bigots they want to be at home. They can have those beliefs, but that doesn't mean that you're allowed to be an asshole to somebody at work. The notion that like it would go against someone's religious like beliefs in
To
a
be a decent fucking human
constitutional
being.
way, to be like required to just, do anything in terms of how you interact with that person at work. I mean, it's insane.
The Bible, look, I just want to be very clear. Let me just say this. The Bible, there is nothing in the Bible that commands people to be assholes and mean to and bigoted against
No. Anyone.
trans people and
Anyone.
non-binary people. And also, there is nothing that in the Constitution that protects your right to be an
That's
asshole
correct. Yeah.
to people for and then
For religious
claim
reasons or
and
otherwise.
and then claim religious liberty. I mean,
Many people are in support of this idea. They don't want to have the thought that they could be fired for refusing to go along with someone else's delusion about their biological sex.
And you don't believe that this is a discrimination bill towards any particular community?
No, I think it protects against discrimination.
You think it protects discrimination?
Absolutely.
You don't believe that this is discriminatory against the LGBT community?
Not at all.
You don't?
No.
Okay, thank you.
I mean, that is wild.
I mean, that was obviously what he was going to say, but like, yeah, it's just like, okay. I mean, in addition to just being just like on its face, like sounding insane to like, I think anybody who would listen to it, like, what do we think is more likely happening in our society? Is it more likely that people are being discriminated on the basis of their LGBTQ status and or being transgendered, or do you think it's more likely that people in an employment situation are being discriminated against because they don't want to go along with saying the pronouns? One of those things is happening a lot more often than the other one. This other thing is not happening. It's not happening.
It's not.
It's not happening. I mean, maybe there's an example. There's always like one example, I'm sure, of anything. But yeah, anyway, it's just, he's such a dick. And
he is, I don't even have words. Anyway, so people should contact Chairwoman Cruz and tell her that you do not appreciate this bill. And you should intentionally misgender her over and over and over again so that she understands what that fucking feels like to people.
yeah, you were doing that already, but that's sort of a good, it's not a joke, like a something that people have been talking about, that I mean, how would one feel at work in their work environment if people were just allowed to just continuously
I mean, if every time I
misgender
walked
them?
past a colleague and they were like, "Hey, what's up, you dirty Jew?"
Right.
Yeah,
Exactly.
that would fucking suck.
Yes, it would. It would.
Okay, we were going to
Yeah.
talk about Senator Edmonds' success
I
sequencing,
gotta
but I know you have to
go.
go.
Yeah.
So let me just say that we'll talk about that next week, maybe. But next week, I just want to let folks know that on Thursday, because this episode will drop on Wednesday, so you will have time to prepare to either come to the Capitol, send an email, or watch the streaming, because on Thursday in the House Health and Welfare Committee are Representative Amity's bill about parents refusing to provide chemotherapy to their children, and also Representative Ventrilla's bill, which we have not talked
It's a
about
new
yet.
one. It was also filed late. A new one. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah. That bill, this is a bill 1121 is like an insane expansion of religious or just refusal to provide health care. It doesn't even have to be religious.
No one can be discriminated in their decision making to not provide healthcare services to someone if it's based on some sort of legitimate belief. We already have a lot of carve outs in the law about bona fide religious beliefs and what you don't, you don't have to provide abortions, with pharmacists don't have to provide, contraception.
That's for an individual. That's an individual provider. This would actually allow employers, insurance companies, hospitals.
We'll do a
get
deeper
into it
dive
next
on that.
week.
But it is insanely broad. Again, a slippery slope is not even the argument there. It's the whole slope. The whole slope. All in one.
It's a plunge. It's not even a slippery slope. It is like a plunge. Well, Ellie, tell the people what they're supposed to do.
Gotta be rating, they gotta be reviewing, and they got to be prescribing. So wait, subscribing. That's
Ellie's
my
practicing
joke.
medicine
It's not back
without a
to, that's right.
license.
It's back to my joke from season 1. Yeah, you can prescribe. That's fine. We're in favor of prescribing, but mostly subscribing. Subscribe, rate, review, and tune in next week for more insanity from our folks.
That's right.
At Legislature.
We'll see you then. Thanks so much.
Thanks, everybody.
Seriously is presented by Lift Louisiana, a nonprofit organization advocating for reproductive health rights and justice.